Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Patrick, and today we're going to be talking about Germany as a country analysis. So let's dive right into it here. Just to give you some perspective on the country in general, the size of it is about half the size of Texas, so it's not a very big country. There are a lot of social welfare contributions that German citizens and people operating within the country do have to pay. There's actually so many that it's almost a third of the total GDP, nominal GDP for the country. So that is pretty impressive. It has one of the highest literacy rates in the world. A lot of the companies at the top are kind of similar, so it doesn't matter that much, but it is good to know if you're going to be starting a business to know what kind of people you're going to be dealing with in that country. Some of the universal services that you do get from paying all these taxes are going to be healthcare, education, you're going to have your pensions, and disability, right? So all of these are going to be covering 100% of the population. There's nobody that's a permanent resident in Germany that isn't covered under these universal services. The economic foundation of Germany is pretty well known in the world, so I'm going to skip the cars and machinery. Chemical production is actually quite high, which I don't think most people are aware. And electronics is like, Bosch, Bose, etc. There is a strong tether between the government and the economy, meaning a lot of the regulations that are imposed, especially because of Germany's position in the EU and NATO, get a lot of scrutiny. So they have to be very careful in what they can allow for companies to do, because it has further impacts and repercussions than it would for, say, a country that's not involved in the EU. So, like I said, they're a founding member. They were one of the first members in the EU as well as NATO, and we'll get into more of that later in the presentation. So the industry focus that I've chosen is going to be in the banking industry. The company for this country analysis wasn't really too dominant in the analysis. It was more about the country, obviously, so I'm probably not going to be mentioning it all that much. Just going to give you some background so you know how to relate it to the banking industry. I've gone with the name Tata Cryptographic Currency Custody Services. This is just going to be a basic savings account type deal with a possibility for lending further down the road. The problem is that lender entities in Germany face pretty much the same problems that they face everywhere, and you have the added pressure and eyes on from the EU and NATO as well to add to that. So the thing about cryptocurrency in the EU or anywhere in the world right now is the legislature is very few. There's not a lot of legislature, is what I'm trying to say. And it's also always changing, so you never know what the laws are going to be, and you have to be responsible for staying on top of it. A lot of people are getting in trouble, even in the United States, with the IRS because they failed to claim their capital gains losses or any trades that they did in the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Obviously, before the legislation was passed, you can't really do anything about that. But now, if you don't claim it, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, and that applies to the EU as well. So the German bank is split up into 3 pillars, right? You see them right there. Commercial, public, and cooperative banks. These are basically just like in terms of size and what they can do, right? These commercial banks are like more of the popular ones, the bigger brands that you see everywhere. Public banks are smaller. They're more regional. They're more like savings accounts and things like that. And then cooperative banks they cooperate within multiple regions, because in Germany, for example, in the north, a lot of the banks don't operate in the south. So the thing is also, on top of the EU and NATO, Germany has the European Central Bank headquarters in Frankfurt. So there's a lot of things that are going on within Germany that attract a lot of eyes from everywhere in the world, not just in Europe. So there's a low interest rate environment going on in the world right now. Great Britain just adopted negative interest rates, so you're basically paying the banks to keep your money for you, which is not a long-term possible thing that you can do as a country without major economic downturns. So the problem here is that liquidity is the number one success metric for most companies, right? It's what you can do with your cash flow and how quickly you can respond to detrimental things that may happen or just in general hurdles that are part of running a business. So the liquidity is a major problem right now. Because the low interest bearing revenues are so low, banks are starting to have to look to other revenue outlets, right? There's got to be new streams of revenue that they need to make in order to make up for what they're losing from the interest side. So what I think this poses as a problem for everybody pretty much is that we're during economic turmoil. There's a lot of pressure from the EU on these banks, especially German banks. And I just think that this is going to open up a lot of possibilities for control, right? Because the banks need to stay profitable. It is a business after all. So how do they do that? They usually do it through control. And the control implementations usually entail that the consumer ends up losing out and they end up benefiting. So this is, not always ethical in my opinion. One more thing, I'm going to talk about digital currency custody real quick because it would be very easy to start a business doing this in Germany. Digital currency custody is going to be just mainly Bitcoin. None of the other currencies are really a store of value in the way that Bitcoin works. These are just some facts on Bitcoin. I mean, you can read up on it all that you can. One surprising thing is Cambridge actually did a study, and 74.1% of all the energy, like the electricity used in the ASIC miners for Bitcoin, is actually renewable. So it comes from hydroelectric plants or windmill farms and things like that. So I thought that was a pretty interesting tidbit. Also, Bitcoin has performed every other major asset class in the world over the last 10 years. Another thing to note is that was the April 8th price in this chart. The price today is at $13,037. That was the high for today. So you also got to adjust the values on that chart to where it is now in terms of looking at if you're going to be a crypto custody business, right? The whole purpose of it would be to have a risk-averse asset class, right? Because it's non-correlated to all the markets. The Dow, S&P 500, and everything else, gold, precious metals, they can do whatever they want, and the network does not really care about it. And lastly, the part of the bank could also be something that a company is doing called BlockFi, is if you have a tier 1 Bitcoin account, you can be earning 6% APY, annual percentage yield, which is quite a bit better than anything that you can find anywhere else, and it's safe. It's fully insured. They're operating out of New York, so these things are happening, and that's why I chose this business. So, the Pestel analysis. Germany is a democratic republic. They have a parliament with a chancellor, which is a little bit different than in Britain and obviously here. The layout is displayed in the graphic to your right. So, USA and France have been very good allies of Germany, especially since the 1990s. The relationship has been very, very strong. So, Germany also has the biggest budget contributions to the EU budget as well as the NATO budget. Germany also is not like theoretically in a direct form of war, right? We have allies, and by proxy we're obligated to certain things, certain military actions because of those allegiant ties. But the problem is that we as a nation didn't choose to go to war with anybody, right? And this has a strong effect on the foreign direct index, foreign direct investment index, right? How willing are other countries, people, or citizens to give money to your country in the forms of starting a business, etc. So the economics of the Pestel analysis. Germany is the 4th largest economy. That was from 2014, but I'm pretty sure it's still around the 4th spot. The two sectors that it relies most heavily on are the industrial sector and the manufacturing sector. But it's important to remember that although these two are the ones that they focus on the most, there's a lot of other things that Germany exports that can make up in case one of these sectors starts to decline, right? The unemployment rate is one of the lowest in the world. It's at 3%, as you can see in the graphic on your left. Private, corporate, and social taxes are extremely high in Germany. I have a regular tax bracket. This is for individuals making 57 to 270,000 a year, which in the United States encompasses a lot if you want to compare it. And they have to pay 42% income tax. That is the tax bracket. Corporate federal tax is 15%. And then you add another 14 to 17% depending on how many cities your corporation is operating in. So it scales with the size of your corporation, and it's kind of weirdly done. Lastly was the diversity of exports, but I already covered that with the agricultural and chemical side of things. So the socio-cultural side, standard of living is extremely high in Germany. The average apartment there just seems like something you pay a lot of money for, even, and especially in Boca, obviously. 65% of the people identify as Christians, 4% identify as Muslim, and then 35% have no recorded religious affiliations. So, however the census was done, 35% is significant enough that there's a lot of people that don't have religious affiliations. The population problems that Germany is experiencing come from, they have a very old population, and Germans aren't reproducing much in terms, like there's not going to be many kids coming up in the newer generations. And there's also a lot of immigration going on and stuff to skew the factors even further in terms of German-born citizens. So the workforce attitude in Germany is much different as well, because people care about punctuality, company loyalty is massive. Trying to be friendly to your coworkers is massive, because they realize that you have these jobs for multiple years and sometimes your whole life because of the company loyalty factor. And then, you got to get along with your employees or your coworkers. On the technological side of things, they have a large middle class, and the middle class has these manufacturing allocation, right? So 11% of the workers in the USA work in the manufacturing district. 22% of workers in Germany work for the manufacturing district or sector. And this is the interesting part. The contribution to the GDP for the manufacturing sectors in the United States is at 13%, whereas in Germany it's at 21%. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that one economy is better than the other, but it shows that the split for the industries is much more geared towards industrial and manufacturing for Germany. And lastly, one of the big things that a lot of German companies got their advantage from is everybody just try to do this thing where they chase Silicon Valley companies and how they did all their revolutionary tech, and everybody wanted to be revolutionary. But the thing was, a lot of German companies realized that revolutionizing or just bettering the manufacturing processes that they already had, they could capitalize on that rather than just trying to start from scratch and finding out a better way. Environmental, Germany has a lot of tourism. There's over like 10 million people that come visit a year. The main export is cars, right? Automobile manufacturing is also the main contributor to GDP. So you can see how there's a possibility for pollution there. But there have been a lot of countermeasures in these industries, like EV vehicles. Most of the manufacturing plants operate on hydroelectric plant power rather than coal or wind turbines, as you see on the left. These farms are super common everywhere in Germany. Legal. It is very non-discriminatory towards immigrants. So they don't discern between you being an immigrant or like permanent resident or being a national born when it comes to the laws. Everybody's kind of treated the same. And there's also no requirements for a business to hire German-born nationals. So this is pretty prominent in the United States. Employment contracts and agreements are the #1 thing to focus on. And I'm running out of time with this program. I'm going to skip the case analysis. And here's the conclusion. So it's all about metrics, right? The sample size has to be large enough. Some of the questions that I asked myself with the company is the debt collection done efficiently? Is there enough infrastructure to support the company? And overall, all these questions were positive for Germany. They have a low investment risk because of the strong manufacturing. They have many exports to cover in cases of risk. Yeah, I'm just going to end it here because I got 5 seconds left. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Have a good one.